The length of wire must also be taken into consideration when adding a circuit. Use the old wire as a guide to determine the needed length. Use a wire gauge chart to determine what gauge of wire should be used for the amount of current and the length of wire needed. The electrical connections inside the connection shell are identified as socket or pins. A socket connection is one which has a shell that encloses the matching pin. Socket connector bodies generally have connector pins. The shell of the connector body protects the pins from accidental short or physical damage. Plug connector bodies generally have connector sockets. This combination protects the sockets from possible shorts or physical damage. AMP manufactures many of the connectors used to connect the electrical control module to the wiring harness. AMP connectors are often used where many connections are required in a single connector body. AMP connectors can often be identified by the gold plating on the sockets and pins of the connectors and the name AMP on the connector body. The terminals in AMP connectors can be replaced individually. Strain relief is used in the connector for clamping the wiring and preventing mechanical stress on the connections. A retention clip is used on one side of the connector to help to ensure that the mating connector bodies remain attached to each other. Insert the stripped wire terminal end into the end of the butt splice. Crimp the butt splice connector using an approved crimping tool. Insert the stripped new wire into the end of the butt splice. Crimp the butt splice connector. Pull firmly on both wires to test the quality of the splice. Using a heat gun, carefully heat shrink the butt splice connector covering until the shrink covering has sealed the joint. During this process, a sealant is released in the butt splice to provide additional insulation around the splice. Use a meter and verify that the splice has a good connection. When connecting electrical connectors, apply a small amount of DS-ES lubricant to the connector terminals. Do not fill the entire connector cavity with lubricant. Use only Cummins recommended lubricant. Engine oil or chassis grease in the connectors can cause ECM damage, poor engine performance, or premature connector terminal wear. Do not use any kind of lubrication on natural gas or Bosch connectors. Expanded terminals in the AMP connector can result in poor electrical contact in the connector. To check for expanded terminals, first push the connector face toward the connector body to remove the internal connector tolerances. Next, insert the gauge tool into the connector until contact is made with the socket or female terminal to be checked. Do not push the tool shaft into the terminal. A very small gap should be seen between the gauge face and the connector face. If no gap can be seen, replace the terminal in the connector body. Push the tool shaft into the terminal until the gauge tool face-to-connector face contact occurs. Slowly remove the tool from the terminal. If very little resistance is felt, replace the terminal in the connector body. To repair a terminal on an AMP connector, remove the plastic connector cover and locate the damaged terminal. Cut the strain relief wire ties to gain access to the wire being repaired. Insert the AMP terminal removal tool into the terminal. This will release the locking pin. Push the tool to the bottom of the cavity. Hold the tool in the connector and pull the terminal out of the connector. To complete the repair, connect the repair wire using a butt splice as previously described. With the AMP terminal removal and insertion tool in the connector in the location for the repaired terminal, Make sure that the tool is pushed all the way into the cavity. Insert the repaired terminal into the connector body. Push the wire into the cavity. Remove the tool. Tug on the wires to make sure it is held tightly in the connector. Install the wire ties used for strain relief and reassemble the connector. To repair a Deutsch connector, start by using needle nose pliers to remove the inner locking wedge. Carefully slide the rear seal back. Place a small screwdriver on the wire locking tab. Press and hold the tab down while pulling the harness wire from the back side of the connector. Attach the repair part as described in the section on butt splices. Insert the electrical terminals through the rear seal and into the connector body. Inspect the rear seal on the connector body and replace it if necessary. Pull on the new wire firmly to test connection. Align the locking wedge in the correct position in the connector body. Insert the locking wedge and snap it into place. Some Deutsch connectors require terminal removal tools. These tools are color-coded to indicate the terminal size they are to be used with. Slide the proper Deutsch terminal removal tool over the wire. Push the tool into the connector until it bottoms on the terminal flange. Keep the tool pressed into the terminal flange and pull the wire and the connecting terminal out of the connector. Install a repair wire on the harness wire and complete the butt splice connection as previously described. Insert the terminal of the repaired wire into the correct hole of the connector. The terminal must click into place. Pull the wire to make sure it is seated in the connector. Metri-pack connector terminals are not replaceable. If one of these terminals is damaged, the connector must be replaced. Be sure to select the correct replacement connector for the one being repaired. To complete the repair, connect the repair wire using a butt splice as previously described. All weather-pack connectors are repaired the same way. To repair the connector, raise up on the locking tab and separate the sections of the connector. Pull the locking tabs apart on the wire lock. Swing the wire lock away from the connector body to provide access to the wiring at the rear of the connector. Using care to prevent the tool from being broken, insert the weather-pack terminal removal tool over the terminal. Use a twisting motion to push the tool to the bottom of the cavity. Pull the wire and terminal out of the connector body. Connect the repair wire to the harness using the procedure described earlier for butt splice connections. Be sure to insert the repaired terminal into the correct connector hole. Insert the terminal firmly into the connector. The locking lances must click and hold the terminal in the body. Close and latch the wire lock on the connector body. Reconnect the harness. To repair a damaged pin in one of the harness ECM electrical connectors, begin by removing the connector backshell from the ECM connector. Next, unlock the secondary locking system by sliding the two purple tabs sideways. The full length of the purple tabs will be visible in the vertical slots when in the unlocked position. Insert the appropriate tool in the connector, but do not push the tool all the way into the connector at this time. Push the corresponding wire toward the extraction tool. Press the pin extraction tool all the way into the connector to release the locking mechanism on the pin. Firmly pull the pin from the back side of the connector. Check to be sure that the locking tang on the pin is protruding from the pin body. Align the guides on the pin with the notches in the connector and insert the pin. Fully seat the pin. Gently pull out on the pin to ensure that it is locked in position. Re-engage the secondary locking system by sliding the purple tabs back to their original position. Then reinstall the backshell. During the installation, check the condition of the connector seal for cuts, damage, or deformation. Check to ensure the seal is properly positioned on the ledge of the connector. When installing the connector, inspect to make sure none of the pins are bent. Install the connector straight into its mating connector to prevent bending the pins during installation.